Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the Wednesday morning study session that shall not be named. Today we are studying with groups of people in Savannah and
Whoops.
Oh,
Whoops.
We lost our leader.
yeah.
I got a message that tells me I'm now the host. So,
All right. Why don't you start the meeting?
Yeah.
yeah, well, I don't even remember the topic. So, the rabbi's back.
Wonder what happened.
Oh. Yeah. So you guys are doing okay, right?
Knock on wood, yes. Thank God.
Yes.
Doing very well.
That's good.
Yeah, I go for my final checkup with the surgeon next
all right,
month.
we're back on. So I got cut off several times, everybody. Welcome to the Wednesday study session that shall not be named. I'm the host who got cut off 3 times already today, probably because everybody wanted it that way. Good morning to everybody who's with us on YouTube, everyone who's with us in person, our Bluffton people, our people from outside of Georgia and South Carolina. Welcome, Arnold. I see some more people are signing in. Welcome. As you know, each week we study a different topic decided by you. So today we're going to be talking about the orthodoxy in the world. As last time we talked a little bit about the Israeli government as of now after the most recent election. And so we suggest we talk a little bit about orthodoxy. Again, it's a very general word. We'll talk about a little bit about the history and the different types of orthodoxy today. Michael has suggested our name should be the Unnamed Study Group. That's another good one. All right. He's not a Harry Potter fan, so he wants the Unnamed Study as well. So we'll go a little bit about orthodoxy. Obviously, orthodoxy is something we all know a little bit about. Orthodoxy is a general word for a group of Jews, but again, as we know, within the bounds of orthodoxy, there is a great wide range. Where did the word orthodox come from? It's kind of interesting because it originated when the original reformers of Judaism in the early 19th century in Germany were reforming Judaism. They used an insult or a slur to name those people who were resisting this reform, and they called them, "Oh, you're Orthodox," as an insult, and it kind of stuck. So the term Orthodox is really only from the 19th century. Before the 19th century, you were religious to a certain fact. You were not named Orthodox. You were Litvak. You were following this rabbi. You were part of a different group. You were not religious at all. So the name itself is fairly new. But we're going to talk about the different groups of orthodoxy. In Israel, we mentioned a little bit about the difference between what they call ultra-Orthodox, which some people consider an insult to say ultra-Orthodox, and modern Orthodox. And in Israel, as we mentioned, it's a lot different than in America because in Israel, there is politics involved because the religious groups are part of the political system, which changes the dynamics of everything. So the biggest difference in many regards between Israel and America, which is, of course, where 93+% of all the Jews in the world live, and almost all the Orthodox Jews, obviously, is that in Israel, modern and ultra are divided because of their political stance as well, where in America, it is not so. So what is ultra Orthodox? Well, it's very simple. Orthodox is basically a belief that you're following the halakha, you're following the laws as they came down from Moses and were interpreted later, written in the Talmud, the Shulchan Aruch, and various other things. Following the law. Now, the conservative movement also believes in the halakha. They believe you can make certain changes to it through previous text. So the conservative movement says we believe in the halakha, but we can make alterations. The most obvious would be mixing of men and women, and then they use a precedent for that from the past. And men and women mixed together 2,000 years ago. Also for reading Torah, for instance, if you're in Orthodox world, you read the entire Torah portion every week on Saturday morning. Well, the conservative movement can go back to like the 19th century and say the Gaonim said you only need to read a third every year. And since the Gaonim did it in the 9th century, it's okay for us to do it based on precedent. So they are also halachic, but Orthodox it considers himself a strict interpreter. The more right or ultra you are, you consider yourself the only, in some cases, or the true interpreter of the law, that you are following it the exact same way as it's supposed to. And some would say others are not. It just depends who you are. Now, we have in our country, as in Israel, we could divide it by modern Orthodox and ultra-Orthodox as well. Not all ultra-Orthodox, again, like the terminology ultra-Orthodox. Sometimes they may want traditional Orthodox. I think is very for them in English or something to that nature. But they're usually called ultra-Orthodox in the outside world. So the difference between the ultra and the modern Orthodox is basically the difference as in any form of Judaism. It's how are you going to live in your country in the modern world as a Jew? It's always the question. I'm a Jew in America, how am I going to live? If I'm a Reform or conservative or secular Jew, I want to be acculturated. I want to look like everybody else, even as I'm keeping the rules. I want people to feel comfortable in my home. I want to go to their home. I want to work with them. I want to be friends with them. Perhaps my kids interdate and it doesn't bother me, or maybe it does, but I still connect with them. So that is how I, as a Reformed Jew, want to live my life. I want to be religious, but I want to be out there mixing with people who are Jewish and non-Jewish. If you're Orthodox, you believe in a fence around your persona. Now, the halacha determines that you have to do some certain things religiously. I cannot eat at somebody's house unless they are keeping the same kashrut level as I am and by the same authority. I can't go to lunch or be part of Rotary or be part of the Kiwanis because I can't go eat in a place that doesn't have a purely kosher kitchen and kosher dining hall and all of these things. I can't go visit you on the Sabbath because you live outside the area I feel comfortable walking in. So in some cases, I don't want my children fraternizing with people who are not exactly like them because I don't want to take any chances that they are going to marry outside the faith. The stricter you get, you might want to say, I don't want them having any interaction with people outside of my world because it may be too alluring, and we'll talk about that. So if you're Orthodox, you're putting a fence around yourself, as we all do, but the more traditional you are, the less permeable that fence is. So you will have people who are Orthodox who live in the world just like us. They might wear a yarmulke all the time. They might even have seat that you can see or can't see, but they're going to a regular job. They don't work on Saturday. They can be a professional like a doctor or a lawyer or a nurse or a teacher. And yet they are still bringing their own lunch to work or only eating at a kosher restaurant, only going to friend's house to schmooze, maybe drinking bottled water or alcohol because alcohol is very easy to be kosher. Or maybe they're not going to people's homes, but they'll go out and go play cards with them or go bowling or go to a movie so there's a wide range of this. In Savannah, obviously, there's an Orthodox synagogue and we have a Chabad. In Bluffton, there's a Chabad as well. So we've seen that there are various Orthodox entities, just like there are various Reform entities. Any questions before we continue? Larry.
Could you explain a little bit about, since there are different versions of Orthodoxy in Israel in particular, what is the role of the chief rabbi? How is he selected? Is there a chief rabbi for the Sephardic and a chief rabbi for the Ashkenazi? And, how do they, how do they administer or, develop, philosophy and procedures?
Great, and that's what we'll go over now. Let's go to what we would call the Haredi world, which is the ultra-Orthodox word that is used. The Haredi are the ones who wear the black hats and the same suits and the payas. Certain ones will have the payas, some will have the tzitzit, all based upon their village in Eastern Europe or somewhere else. And that's why they look that way, because their ancestors in the 15th, 14th, and 13th century, they believed looked this way. So they wear the same outfits they would have worn, although probably a lot nicer depending on your wealth. So the Haredi are the Orthodox, again, who look like what we're thinking about in Orthodox. You'll find them in New York, obviously, in Israel. And again, there is not one overarching Haredi leader. They are not a unified bunch in terms of their beliefs. They each have different groups that follow different rabbis. If you're going to be Orthodox, you give power to whoever is you believe is in charge. So I am from this Orthodox sect. This is my rabbi. He goes by the views of this higher up rabbi. And that's where my laws come from. In Israel, obviously, there's some political and actual judicial laws, but outside of Israel and America, it's purely me. I look at this rabbi, he is in charge, and I have determined that myself. Of course, they create a society where it's hard to leave that. As for, they do elect a chief rabbi in Israel for the Sephardic and Ashkenazic. I'm not exactly sure how they're elected. The Sephardic is a little bit easier because they're a little bit more united, but I'll have to check. That's a good idea. I mean, obviously, the most famous was the original chief rabbi of Israel, which was Rav Kook. But we'll go over that in a second as well. So let's divide some of the Haredi into different parts. There are Haredi who are Sephardic and Ashkenazic. Within the Ashkenazic and Sephardic world, there are different ones, obviously. There are Haredi who support the idea of a state of Israel, and the Haredi who don't support the idea of a state of Israel. Most are of the, it's okay, but it's not religiously important. Most Haredi believe that the true state of Israel will come when the Messiah comes. So are those like the Satmars who completely look at Israel as a heretical entity, that Jews starting their own country in Israel is not a good thing. These are the ones that meet with the Ayatollah and are hateful to any Jews living in Israel or who support the Jewish state. Most Haredi are not of this group. Most of them are of the idea that it's okay for Jews, it's just not a holy country, but we're accepting it because it is what it is. So most Haredi are not anti-Israel, they're just basically saying it's okay, it's just not a religious country. Now, in Israel, obviously, it's political, so they do not serve in the military. But in America, that is not the case. In America, you have to make a living. So it is a very tight rope they walk. They have to create a world where they can live exclusively, where they only mingle with each other. And that means you can learn a trade because you may need to work with outside forces to make a living. But once work is closed, what do? You go back into your world. You only access the outside world if it is needed for medicine or for business. Outside of that, your whole life is based upon this one world where you know everybody and everybody looks the same and is from the same, probably from the same group within the group. You have rivalries and so forth, but your whole life is based upon the Torah and the Talmud. So outside of business or medical or certain little things, your whole life will be around the same people.
Rabbi, what percentage-wise, what percentage would you say are Haredi in the population of Israel?
A Haredi in Israel, I think it's somewhere like 7 or 8%.
7 or 8%. So
I
very,
think something like that.
very
Look that
small.
up.
And what
Yeah.
percentage would you think?
But it's growing. I mean, remember
Yeah.
in 1948 when Ben Gurion set the laws, there were only 200 of them.
And an Orthodox total in Israel, what would you say?
I'd say 12% to 15%.
About double the Haredi. Yeah.
Not a double, about the same. I mean,
About
yeah,
the same.
it's
Yeah,
about
yeah.
50,
That's what I meant. Yeah.
So in 1948, the Haredi were about 4%. Now they are probably somewhere around, I mean, the Orthodox 4%, now they're somewhere around 12 to 15% because they have so many kids. So that's one of the other issues we'll talk about politically. So you live your world now. It is a
Are they
very,
in the settlements, do you know? Or did they go into the settlements, or are they predominantly in Jerusalem?
they're predominantly in Jerusalem and other places in Israel. They are not, the settlements would be more the modern Orthodox. The Haredi are not really pro-Israel, all of this stuff. They do want the settlements probably, but they're not the ones who generally go out there and live in them. They live in their own world. Michael.
What are the rules about birth control that they follow that, you know?
It is not allowed. It is
And where in the Torah does it say that? I mean, is that not spilling your seed? Is that
exactly? It's from
Yeah.
the Talmud. There's different places, but it's also the belief that we need to create, and you know, that Judaism needs to proliferate and have more and more kids in the future. So that has been a belief for very long. It is the first commandment of the 613 is to have kids. And so you have as many now. Again, as we know, generally speaking, the wealthier you are, the less kids you have. That's the same. A lot of the Haredi are not wealthy. A lot of them are very poor in Israel because they don't work. In Israel, it's different because they don't do jobs because the government pays them to do nothing, basically. And that is going to continue with the new government. So they don't serve in the military, they don't work, men or women. In America, that is different. You may have to work, but you still stay within the society. So there has to be certain bounds. They try and keep, for instance, technology away from them. So no cell phones, no access to the computer in America unless you need it for work. And they have started kind of what you would call Haredi cell phones, where you don't have technology on it. You can only use it to make calls, or we have access to the internet with very serious controls over it. But again, it's a beautiful way to live in terms of it's very close knit, but there's also some serious negatives in terms of you can't leave because, in the best of cases, everybody's getting along. In the worst of cases, people can't leave because they have no skills and nobody they know outside of this world. Plus, women are not always literate. Plus, they don't always speak the language of the country. They may only speak the language of their people. Plus, women will, have kids at 16, 17, 18. And so if you have kids, that means if you try and leave, your kids stay. And you can't take your kids with you because obviously you have no money to sue for custody and all that. So there's a lot of negatives, but there's a lot of positives in that they are very family oriented. They stay together. They don't have to worry about their kids being on their phones all day long. They all know each other. They live in a safe space. The kids are, so there's a lot of positives to it. They believe they're living according to what Moses said, even though from our perspective, we may not, we look at it differently. So it is, again, a way of putting the fence around them to the extent that they keep others away. Now, who do they want to keep away most is not Christians. They want to keep Jews who reform away most, because we are saying we can be religious in a different way. So there is a very, very steep competition there. Secular Jews are not as much of a threat, because if you go secular, it's not seen as competition. They want to keep you from being secular. In the Orthodox world, you have the Sephardic and the Ashkenazic. Who do you think is more strict in their interpretation of the law? The Sephardic or the Ashkenazic? The answer is the Ashkenazic is much stricter. Much, much more strict. Why is the Ashkenazic more strict? So Ovadia Yosef, who's the Shas leader, as we all know, is actually much more lenient, although we know he's, gone to jail for tax evasion and all these issues. But in terms of their interpretation of the law, the Sephardic are much more lenient, because what never happened in the Sephardic world? They never had a Haskalah. They never had a reformation in the Sephardic world. There's no reform movement in the Sephardic world. In the Sephardic world, you're either religious or you're not. There's nothing in the middle. And so there's no competition for the ultra-Orthodox in the Sephardic world. They don't have to worry about competition from the reform movement, so they can be very lenient. Whereas the Ashkenazic believe that they can't be lenient because they don't want people leaving to go to the conservative and reform movements. So they're much more strict with everything. Larry.
When you hear the term black hats, are all black hats Haredi?
Yeah, generally speaking, black hat means Haredi. Yeah, generally speaking, that's what it is. Because modern Orthodox do not wear the black hats. And again, black hat is a general term, but there's a wide range of hats they wear depending on where their family was in Eastern Europe. So, but yeah, if you say black hat, it's not always a derogatory term. Sometimes it is, sometimes it isn't. But what you have to understand is some don't wear black hats at all, but it's all based upon where you were in ancient society hundreds of years ago. Now, what we have to understand is, traditionally speaking, Israel is a problem in this world, in the Orthodox world, because you shouldn't be starting a Jewish country unless the Messiah comes. But yet there is a Jewish country. So Samuel Raphael Hirsch, who was the great 19th and 20th century Orthodox sage, basically said the labor Zionists are setting the stage for the Messiah to come. So that's how they kind of got around the idea that they're setting the stage for it. So it allows the modern Orthodox to be very supportive of Israel, and the ultra-Orthodox to say, okay, we don't support it, but we accept it. Not counting those who are anti-Israel, which is a small sect. Larry.
We have some friends that have children. They are not ultra-Orthodox, the friends, but the children are, who live in Israel. And they talk about their kids to us sometimes. And they say that one of the things that the kids talk to them quite often about is that the whole philosophy of their ultra-Orthodoxy is based on not leading I wouldn't use the word happy life, but not leading a comfortable life, that you have to be, willing to give up so many things. And so many of what we consider to be almost everyday conveniences and those kind of things that you were meant almost to suffer through life, which seems to be so antithetical to the vision of the people dancing around the Torah and, that kind of vision that you have of the Orthodoxy all the time, welcoming in the shop. Is that a common thing among it, or is that just a particular view that this particular family has?
They all have different views, but you have to understand there's in that perspective, there's two types of groups. There are those who are born and raised Orthodox, so they're not giving up all this outside world stuff because they never had it. But if you're leaving our world to go to that world, you are giving up all this stuff. So that's probably how they have had it defined in their minds to help them do it. I know people who've gone Black Hat as well, and some are very anti where they came from, and they have to be to live in their own world. Some have given up their parents, and some are not. It's like if somebody converts to another religion, sometimes they still love their parents that are connected to the family, and sometimes they just say I have to disconnect. But yet that is particularly for that group of people. Not everybody sees that way, that they have to give up. I mean, for a lot of people, it's a joyous thing, and you're living your life. You do have to give up certain things, but everybody else does too. And in that world, keeping kosher is not a big deal because everywhere they go is kosher. I mean, everybody's home they go to is kosher. There's kosher butcher shops, there's kosher restaurants, everything's kosher. It's very easy. If you live in our world, it's very easy to keep kosher. You go to the Kroger's on Mall in Savannah, or you go to Food Lion in Bluffton, and they got plenty of kosher stuff. You go get, Oreo cookies, and guess what? They're kosher. What else do you need besides Oreo cookies? I mean, really, Oreo cookies are kosher. That's enough to live on.
You have to read a lot of labels, though. You have to read a lot of labels.
Yes, you do. But if you live in the ultra-Orthodox world, you don't, because you go to the ultra-Orthodox grocery store and and also everything's a lot cheaper. I mean, because in the ultra-Orthodox world, and like Israel, for instance, they ensure that the ultra-Orthodox neighborhood stores are about half the price or less of the other Israeli stores. So it's a way that's one of the issues that a lot of modern Israelis have, is that the ultra-Orthodox get, everything at a third of the price. So it's a beautiful way to live and it's in many ways an easier way to live. It sounds like it's harder because you're giving up stuff, but it's not. You have very specific rules on what you do every day, and you just follow the rules. It's not hard to keep kosher if you've been doing it your whole life. It's not hard to just walk everywhere on Sabbath if you live within an area that you've always done it.
What is the role of women? What is the role of women, would you say? Is it
that is the biggest issue that we in the outside have. There's nothing wrong, in modern, if you choose to go in that world as a woman, it's not a big deal, but there's a very big sense of inequality. From their perspective, it's not inequality, it's a different way. Women are considered more holier, so they don't have to follow certain rules. From our perspective, we would say that is an excuse. So women have a very limited role in many respects. They're not required to go to services. And when it comes to certain sects of the ultra-Orthodox world, not all of them, they are very, very, very strict on women. They don't work. They get married young. Some places they're not educated. Some places they don't speak the language of the land. And they get married very young, so they have children, so they are tied. In Israel, there is not even discussion on getting these women to go into the military. They're trying to get the men, but not the women. So it is a very strict world for the women. They can't hold leadership positions. They have a role. They raise the family, and that is their role. Now, in America, obviously, they may work because out of necessity, women work. Israel and America are very different in that way because, it can be very, very, there's a lot of books and movies and so forth on the issues of women in this world, because you're basically under the control of your husband. And if your husband's not a nice person, you are stuck. And that is a real problem. That's one of the big issues, because women cannot ask for divorce. Only the men can ask for divorce.
Yeah, I was going to mention, I'm sorry, Michael, go on.
Michael?
Yeah, I just, among the different sects, is there any, real substantive difference in practice?
From our perspective, probably not. From their perspective, yes. There's different views on Torah, different views on kosher. You may go to the store and you see an OU and say, And and I look at a K and I say K's fine. You'll say, well, the K's not fine for me. So for us, it's like nonsense. I mean, what's the difference between the K and the OU? For somebody else, it's like, well, this group is overseeing it versus this group, and this group is a lot more strict. The Eruv has to be put in a certain way. I will have dairy, and then I'll eat meat 3 hours before, which for me, I'd say, no, it's got to be more than 5 hours. And another person may say, no. So there, for us, it would seem minimal. You know, you wear these clothes, I wear these clothes. You follow this sage, I follow this sage. But to them, it can be a very significant difference. It's kind of like you saying, you know, this is a bad analogy, you know, you like, you know, Law and Order, and I like all Law and Order, one of the particular ones. So for you and me, it's a huge difference because I'm watching the show and it has completely different characters but to somebody on the outside world, they're like, well, they're both Law and Order. What's the difference? You know, so, but to them, there's some very significant differences, but not compared to their differences to us. Larry.
Yeah, I was wondering about the differences between Chabad and the Haredi. The Chabad, you know, at least in America, where we're familiar with, you know, many of the Chabad, they seem to be wanting to be part of the community. The women play much more of an active role, and they not only teach, but you know, not only challah baking, but teach other things as well. In Israel, is the Chabad at all popular?
Well, Chabad is a anomaly in the Haredi world. They are considered Haredi in many respects, but they are kind of like the Jehovah's Witness. They go out into the world to try and bring people in. So they will go out to liberal world and try and bring Judaism to them and also fundraise in the outside world, because there's a lot of money from Jews outside of the Orthodox world. And so they will fundraise in our world, bring money, try and bring Judaism to the outside world while fundraising and getting money from outside sources. So it's a very different way of looking at things. They do not always get along with the rest of the Haredi, but they're still considered Haredi in many respects. They're still Orthodox, so they follow the same rules, but very different in the outlook, because if you're a general Haredi person lives in their own world. I'm living in this neighborhood of New York, and I'm only leaving really if I need to go for business or I'm visiting family. Whereas Chabad will go to small towns and start up a way of connecting Jews to their brand. So it's a very different way of looking at the world.
In Israel, they do that as well?
Even more so in Israel, because obviously everybody else is Israeli. I mean, everybody else is Jewish, so they can go to everybody. And a lot of Israelis travel. When they travel, they go find Chabad wherever they go. So it's a different way. It's the same type of orthodoxy, except they kind of do their own thing. And in many ways, they're stricter. In some ways, they're less strict. The wall they have around themselves is very different. I mean, they're not coming to our house to eat, but they will come to our house to talk, to visit, to fundraise, and that kind of thing. You know, they'll come into our synagogue, but, you know, so it's a very different way of looking at the world. And again, we see that there's not one way, but throughout history, Haredi have changed in many respects because of the modern world. There's never been a time in history until the modern world of Israel in which this group of people didn't work. I mean, it's always been the case in Judaism that scholars were supported by the community. That's always been the case. The rabbi, you know, you're in a small town in wherever, Poland, and one of the kids is really bright. He's from a poor family, but he's got a knack for Torah or Talmud. So the community will come together and what? Pay for him to go study somewhere. And that's our duty as the community. And so until the modern state of Israel, where the rule has now become nobody in this world works, that is a very new idea that's only been around in the modern state of Israel. And again, there's a lot of good, but there's also a lot of issues in this community that makes it difficult for us. For instance, in America, obviously it's not political, but it can be. How can it be political? It's very simple. These large groups of people move into one area of obviously someplace, usually New York State or New Jersey. What do? They move into the area and they basically hostilely in many ways take over because nobody wants to live there next and this. And what do? All of a sudden, they are the majority in an area. So guess who's in charge of the school board? Guess who the mayor is beholden to? Guess who the congressman is beholden to? So that means even though it's a public school, it's really one of their schools. And that means also when a kid gets to a certain age, or I don't know what the rule is, they're automatically put on welfare. Like all of these people are put on welfare right away in America. So they're getting money right away. So they make sure that everybody is on welfare. So you're getting as much money from the US as you can. They really just recently just had a New York Times article where they went in to test levels of boys and girls in these schools. And guess what? Not surprising, although 100% of every school and every child, 100% was below target in every area.
Really?
English, math, science, 100%
Where was that study?
in New York. So you can go on New York Times and read. I mean, it's not surprising. Again, because in the Haredi schools, there's nobody but Haredi. I mean, am I going to
Is
send
that
my kids?
COVID related though? Because many
No,
of the
has
studies
nothing to do with COVID. No,
are
it has nothing to
COVID, talk about the same thing. Yeah.
No, this is not to COVID. I mean, again, they teach their kids Yiddish. They don't do any math or science at all.
Yeah.
They're teaching Talmud. The girls don't learn anything except for basic needs to maybe work a business. Now, some of the women do work in America because you need to, but the idea is if you keep people uneducated, they can't leave this world. If you keep them poor, they can't leave this world. If their money is tied up in this world and all their friends, they can't leave. So that is the very big negative to it. In Israel and in some places, and not all of it, you have these leaders that control all the money, and they are very, very much in control. And so it can be a beautiful way, but it also leads to a lot of corruption, and it can lead to a lot of issues for women who are stuck. Again, in some worlds, they do what they're supposed to do. And we're in a Hasidic group following a rabbi, and we have a committee. And if a woman wants a divorce and she's being abused, our committee forces the guy to give her a divorce. But in other places, it can't be done, and she's stuck.
Yeah.
But anybody who wants to leave, they have organizations for women, especially trying to leave this world. Trying to teach them. Yeah, but again, it's very difficult. If you're living in Israel and America and you're a woman and you don't read or write very well and you speak Yiddish, not English or Hebrew, and you have no friends,
and the court system also seems to substantiate a lot of their ideas about the importance of the community and rather than the importance of the mother in many cases. And there were some heartbreaking stories. I'm sure you've seen them.
Well, in Israel, there's two court systems. There's the court system and then there's the Orthodox court system. So there's two different ones. And a woman maybe wants to go to one, but they have to go to, so it's a very difficult thing. And again, from our perspective, we see it. From their perspective, in that world, it can be very beautiful, but as it is, there can be a lot of corruption and a lot of issues for women, as we know. And so for us, it's a very strange world, but think about how beautiful it is. You go into this world and you're set for life. You don't have to worry about finding friends. You don't have to worry about job. You don't have to worry about your future. The community will figure out a way to take care of you in one way or the other, hopefully. And, you get married, you don't have to worry about finding a spouse. It's kind of, in some places, you go on dates and Some places it's still arranged, but most places you go on dates for until they, get it, you get you married. But you're still very young, 18, 19, 20, you're already married for sure.
As you know, we go to New Jersey in the summertime, and probably the newspaper down there, if people still get newspapers, is the Asbury Park Press. And many towns in the New Jersey area, Toms River, and in that particular area, they're constantly under what they call reassessment for real estate taxes. And the last time we were there, which was last summer, they had reassessed, I think it was Brick Township or something like, and they claimed that I think 17% of the homes in Brick Township were now considered to be religious establishments, which didn't pay any taxes. And so they had to reevaluate the tax rate and things of that nature. And people were just furious. That was just one particular area. And I know it's not only a Jewish thing, the Mormons do it, and everybody takes advantage of,
Well, think about it. If they're in an area, they may have the judges are beholden to them, city council's beholden to them, because if they're in the entire area, and so they get almost what they want. They may pay taxes, but if the taxes go to the city, go to them, then it's okay to pay taxes. If the taxes go to the
they declare
government,
their homes basically as religious schools of some sort.
and they also declare themselves
synagogues. Yeah,
and they make so little money that legally they make so little money they don't have to pay taxes. So yeah, they do. It's what they do. And again, it's a smart way of doing it. If you can take over a whole area, you can take total control.
It's not only a Jewish thing.
No, it is not.
The other religions do it as well, and they do police them to some extent to see whether or not they, still satisfy the tax exempt status. But it's overwhelming in certain areas.
Yeah, and again, it's just assumed in most areas that this is going to happen. Everybody knows it's going on. And now on the modern Orthodox, though, they're living in the world, so they have to be competing. So they want to go to Yeshiva U, or they want to go someplace so there's a lot of difference between the groups. They don't always get along in America or Israel. In fact, they probably don't get along a lot. If you're ultra Orthodox in America and you see somebody who's modern Orthodox, you're probably not going to want to, it's not somebody you're going to hang with.
You had mentioned earlier, I think the first thing you said was that 93% of the Jews are in Israel and the United States. Is that?
Yeah, I thought it was lower. I just looked up the statistics for another one. It's over 93%.
I didn't realize that. Wow.
I thought it was over 85% now. The last study said it's over now 93. It's like 93.7%.
Wow.
Yeah. Well, it's not surprising. What other big, the big other countries that had Jews, Argentina, and of course, Jews have been leaving there like crazy. France, Jews have been leaving there like crazy. And those were the only other places that had more than 250,000 Jews. They still do, but it's, smaller. Russia is a very hard place to count. I think because you don't know who's really Jewish or not. But Russia has a very small percentage of Jews because a lot of them left in the 90s. Some have gone back, but that's always a hard place to count. But if you go online, you can go online to the latest Pew studies, and I just looked at the new one. I didn't realize it was that high. I thought it was a little bit lower. I thought it was like above 85%, but not 93%. So,
what is your relationship, Rabbi, with the Orthodox community in Savannah? I know Savannah kind of uses itself as an example, especially with the JEA and those places. Could you talk a little about that?
Oh, sure. Now, remember, we're not talking ultra-Orthodox. Okay. I have no ultra-Orthodox rabbi would have any relationship with me. They might have a relationship with you, but not with me. In Savannah, we have a very good relationship as far as we can have it. I go there for the fundraisers. I know all the people there. The rabbi and I, we'll shake hands. But he cannot be my pal. I can't go over to his house for dinner because he's part of an organization that would never. That's a little bit much. But yeah, we have a great relationship with them in terms of we get along. Our sisterhoods do. Obviously, the last couple of years, nobody's done anything. But before COVID, our sisterhoods were doing stuff together. I just went to their big fundraiser recently. I hadn't gone to one in a couple of years because of COVID. But, now the rabbi there is not going to come to our synagogue. That is against, basically, he came one time. And that was when somebody who passed away, who was a war hero, and that was the only time. But this is a Reform synagogue, so this is a very difficult place for them to agree to visit, which I understand. So in their world, they preach against Reform Judaism because their world is about these living Jewishly in a certain way. Plus, but again, in terms of getting along, we're getting along fine, and we always and I have a good relationship. And again, you have to also understand, it's not a real big competition between the Orthodox here and the Reform. I mean, again, it's a very different world. So it's not like, we're going after the same people to join our congregations. I mean, the more traditional Orthodox, modern Orthodox, and a more liberal Reform synagogue are very different. So, and we have people who are members of all the congregations in town. So we get along really well here, which is great.
And
It's
the
not always the
JEA,
case.
I know occasionally we've been to the JEA and they'll have a joint dinner there and things like this, for all three.
Yeah, they do that. And again, we all, the three synagogues get along pretty well here. Chabad is Chabad is relatively new here. It's been here a couple of years. It's sponsored by some of the people in the Orthodox synagogue here. So, again, there's always issues. Sometimes Chabad doesn't get along with the Orthodox synagogue in the area. Here they do. Sometimes Chabad doesn't get along with other places because they're very much a fundraising organization, and they go out and really do that hard. But we get along real well here. So it's often dependent on the individuals. But in America, this can happen. Outside of America, the Orthodox and Reform do not get along very well. If you go to a European country or Australia or South Africa, the Reform and Orthodox are really at odds. In America, with the more modern and liberal Orthodox, they often get along pretty well with the Reform. But outside of here,
Does the idea of orthodoxy, as you explained, almost like a cradle to birth, it kind of reminds me of some of the Scandinavian countries, where from the moment you're born till the moment you die, you're taken care of by the government, these social democracies. Is that something of a tenet of Judaism? Do they get that from the, from the Torah?
Again, they do. That's their belief system, but there's a lot of different interpretations. Excuse me. Some people say that Judaism is about putting a very stiff boundary around you. And others would say, no, it's about being Jewish, but being connected to the outside world. And again, both are legitimate viewpoints. I mean, there's nothing wrong with either. I think Orthodoxy is a beautiful way, and it's done, if it's done in a way that is circumventing the rights of women, then I object to that. But I don't object to Orthodoxy at all. I mean, there's an Orthodox synagogue in town, which is a wonderful place with good people. But, in some of the ultra-Orthodox places, they repress women in a way that I do not agree with at all. And in other ultra-Orthodox communities, they don't. They treat them well. So it just depends on where you're at. But again, there's a lot of, not all Reform Jews get along with Orthodox Jews, and we talk negatively at times like I am. There's certain aspects I do not agree with, and they will do the same with us. So it's a very interesting world. Ron.
Yeah, Rabbi, what about the modern Orthodox? Arlene and I were in the airport, I think it was New York, and we saw a group very fancy dressed, and the women wore the steitels, the hair pieces. Oh, can you talk a little bit about that?
Well, they could be modern or they could be ultra. Now, the women can have their own hair, but it's considered very alluring. So once you're married, in certain sects of Judaism, you have to cut your hair and wear a wig so that it is not alluring. So only your husband, or you should be able to see, the only man who should be able to see your hair is your husband. So that is why they wear the shade. That's where they wear those things. So you get married at 16, 17, 18, your head is shaved. And you wear those for the rest of your life. And that's their tradition. Again.
So why are they called modern Orthodox now?
Modern Orthodox can believe in this as well. Again, that is an Orthodox viewpoint. Not all Orthodox women do this, but a lot do. if you're living in that world. So there are modern Orthodox women who do that a lot as well. And again, it has nothing to do with what you're wearing. You can be a modern Orthodox woman and cover your whole body, but wear really nice clothing. I mean, some of those wigs are $10,000, $20,000. They're not cheap. And you could be very wealthy and Orthodox. There's a lot of very wealthy Orthodox people, and you wear, I don't know the names of the companies, but the most expensive clothing, but it just covers yourself. And so that's very possible. And those hats those guys wear, you see some of those hats, oh my goodness, some of those hats are a lot of money.
It
So,
was a funny incident with Stissel that I heard an interview where they were making the film Stissel, which was not done by, the Orthodox would
no,
not
they wouldn't do
allow them to
that.
be filmed. So they went to try and buy some of those beaver style hats. I think they made of beaver fur. And they said, no, we can't sell them to you because you're using it for a purpose that's not religious. It's an entertainment purpose. So they went back and they made fake fur kind of hats for the show Stissel. And as a result, they were criticized for not being authentic because they didn't use the
In other words, when they're called modern, they don't vary from the orthodoxy.
Well, modern and ultra Orthodox is you're kind of within the bubble of a certain group that goes back to a certain place in shtetl times, and you do not live in the world. Modern Orthodox, you live in the world a lot more. You're working within the world, so it's sometimes it's a very clear distinction. Sometimes it's not. In Israel, it's a very clear distinction. If you're modern Orthodox, you serve in the military, you work. If you're ultra Orthodox, you don't. In America, it's a little bit more gray as to which one you'll be part of. So that's it's not as definitive of if you're Haredi here. You would call yourself Haredi, but to those of us on the outside, it may be hard to tell sometimes the difference. And again, in Israel, Haredi are almost all poor. They get their money from the government, from the people's taxes, but not all of them, because the leaders have money. They control all this money that's coming in from the taxes. In America, a lot of them are very poor. As I said, they go right on welfare and they get to be born basically, so they can take as much money. So let's say we're part of a Haredi group and all the money is controlled by me, so all of you are on welfare, but we still have access to this money. But if I'm a religious entity, then obviously I may not be paying taxes on it.
I was just going to say, years ago when we were in Israel and we went to the Mea Shearim district, we were warned by our guide there, that we might be accosted by people who may even, throw stones at us or, is it still that way? In other words,
definitely, 100%.
You even if you went into their neighborhood just to see what their life was like.
Yeah. They're very anti us, especially Reform liberal Jews. And I just saw the population of Haredi is now up to 12% of Israel. And it's going to be 16% in a few years. So as you can see, the biggest issue in Israel is the Haredi, because because the whole rest of the country has to support them. So as their numbers grow, and they have like 7.2 kids per family on average, and as those numbers grow and they don't work, we can see the problems. But from their perspective, it doesn't matter, because they're not, if they are part of Israel or another country, it doesn't matter because they're not Zionists. So it's a big, it's a conundrum.
But
in Israel in the past week?
On the other side, Michael?
The other side of it is when they grow to a certain percentage, if they bother to vote, they're going to control the government.
They do vote. Oh yeah, they do. And they do right now, they control the government.
But they're going to control it in a big way. If you have 25%.
Exactly. And that's what everybody knows is going to happen.
Yeah.
But there's no way they're not able to do anything about it. It may be too late. I don't know what, Israel's going to have to figure out what they're going to do eventually.
Anything new in the past week in Israel since, we spoke last week and some
I
of
don't,
the,
I don't, there's always something new, but right now, because Israel's a parliamentary government, a minority group can have a big effect, and Netanyahu needs the Haredi in his government, so he's completely.
riots and demonstrations still going on there.
Oh
I
yeah,
haven't
those are
seen
still
it in the
going
news.
on, but I mean they're in control of the government, so it's not going to make a difference. So right now it's an interesting time in Israel. We'll see what they decide to do. Everybody knows by 2050, if it keeps going this way, Israel is going to cease to be a country, and they all know that. Once that group gets to be 25 or 30%, you just can't afford to have that population not working. And a lot of Israelis are going to leave, and a lot of the tech companies are going to leave because they don't want to pay taxes. So everybody knows this is going to happen. It's the question is, are they going to do anything about it, and what are they, how are they going to address it? So that's the issue. So we'll see what they decide. But I mean, everybody knows what's happening. I mean, it's not hidden. And so it's going to, what will have to happen eventually is the Likud party are going to have to agree to work with the liberal parties to fix this system. But there's such a difference in viewpoints between those two. They haven't been able to do it yet. So we'll see. All right. But again, these are difficult questions. And again, whenever you mix religion and politics, there's a lot of issues. In America, we don't have it this way. So it's not as big as of an issue. And plus we're, a very small minority. And plus they have a lot of kids. So it's great for the future of Judaism. But the Judaism they live is really been last 600, 700, 800 years, as they wear the garb of the Polish nobles from hundreds of years ago. But they believe they're keeping Judaism as supposed to, and they are. They're in many respects, because they're following all the laws strictly according to their viewpoint. We follow the laws according to our viewpoint. So it's really, good or bad is often dependent on the individuals and the intents, not the rules themselves. All right. So good class as always. Anybody we have any other topics they want to start doing? And if we're thinking about a time for a study session in Bluffton in March, so I'll tentatively maybe set a date now if that's okay. And I'll check it with Flossie obviously before. But if she said mid-March, then maybe like March 15th or something like that. How does that sound, everybody?
We'll probably be heading back to New Jersey, and then March we have a bat mitzvah b'nai mitzvah.
And how about March 8th?
Well, that's fine. You got to check with Flossie and see when she's available.
Yeah, I'm just going to ask her a couple of dates.
Yeah.
So,
But don't count on us, is what I'm saying. March is a difficult time for us. Yeah, March.
Larry, unless you're there, I'm not having a class.
Okay, I appreciate that.
That's how it is. I don't care if anybody else comes.
Yeah, I think Michael's got to be there. I think.
No, I don't care about Michael,
Oh, Larry,
Ron,
Larry,
or Arlene, or
you're the
Arnold.
straw that stirs the.
I don't care about your wife, what's her name, or Ron's
Rabbi.
wife, what's her name, or any of the other people.
Who we haven't seen lately is Noel from Texas.
I know. I'll give Noel a call, see how she's doing.
Yeah.
All right.
Wendy
So
also, we haven't seen Wendy at any of our meetings. Do you
yeah,
still?
well,
see
maybe if we do
Wendy
something
Elements?
live. But does anybody have any thoughts as what they want to study next week?
I just saw an interesting documentary on TV. It was on this, American authors, and one of them was Saul Bellow, which I had read in his books years and years ago, and I didn't remember much about any of them. But some of the American authors are pretty interesting.
All right, we'll talk about
Philip
American
Roth,
Jewish
of course,
authors.
We talked about Philip Roth and, some of the others.
That was on PBS.
On PBS. Did you see that one? It was
Yes,
excellent.
yes, we did.
All right, let's talk about American Jewish authors. Bring some of your favorite books or thoughts.
Yeah,
And
Chaim
it could be
Potok, I
anybody
know we
from
talked about.
playwrights like Neil Simon to Philip Roth. And I think those are good ideas.
Arthur Miller, of course, for plays.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
All right, so we'll do American Jewish authors next time.
Good.
okay.
All right, and then I'll talk to Flossie about the dates for that. Also coming up, we do have our Purim Spiel. Make sure put on it on March 5th at noon, and it should be a lot of fun. We're gonna have people from AA. If anybody I know, we're gonna have some Bluffton people participating. So, and then although I know Ken is in town, I realized I accidentally set up Jews in the Movies on Friday the 17th. And we're probably not going to put that on video because my Jews in TV got kicked off YouTube.
Oh, why is that?
Really?
Because of copyright?
Yes, because apparently the Dick Van Dyke Show does not like having their stuff on YouTube. So,
Oh, yeah,
I
yeah, they
got kicked
become
off
very, very particular. I tried to do that with some Woody Allen clips of some films
Yeah.
I was showing, yeah, and.
we got all of them passed
can't
through
get his-
except for Dick Van Dyke Show.
Okay, all right, yeah,
But have a good one, everybody. A
okay.
pleasure. Hope everybody on YouTube enjoyed it. Hope everybody here. And next week, we're going to talk about American Jewish authors. Sounds like a name of a rock group. All right, guys. I'll see you guys later. If you need anything else, also this Friday, we have Truman, who's going to be playing camp style guitar if you're interested for Friday night. All right, guys.
Hey,
Oh,
all.
also, when's it men's night? The men's Seder on March 22nd is the men's Seder. That should be awesome. We're going to have steaks, I think, or we're going to have a really nice alcohol too. All right, guys. See you guys later. Stay safe.
Even if I come, how am I gonna drive home?
We'll drive you home. Stay safe, everybody.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Michael, give our
Bye.
best to your wife.
Fine now.
Oh,
Yeah, I hope
thanks.
everything goes
Yeah.
well.
Yeah,
Hope
thanks.
everything works out fine. You know,
Yeah,
Yeah,
amen to
well,
that.
it is what it is. Larry knows.
take care.